And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, if federal budget priorities shift to higher taxes on the rich, could I buy this latte? And will I remember to bring a straw on my next outdoor excursion so I could snort that line of ants like a rock star? And now, the podcast host who on his outdoor adventures only inhales the fresh mountain air, Pete Dominic!
Well, there's other things that I sometimes inhale, too. Like I once inhaled a bug, speaking of which, and that was a horrible thing. Hello and welcome. Thank you, Pete Coe, for another great intro. I really appreciate you and all that you do. Very excited to have you joining me, folks. I've got two excellent guests joining me, both April Rain and S.E. Cupp. Awesome conversations with both of them. It's Thursday, so I hope to see stand-up subscribers at tonight's Hangout at 8 East. This Saturday night, I'll be performing with Ophir Eisenberg and Christian Finnegan in Beacon, New York at the Howland Center. And yesterday, I won the Recounts new trivia game show, so I'm very excited about all of that and very happy to have you joining me. Lots to talk about on today's show. I do have a news segment for you. Let's talk about what happened yesterday. It's time for The Last 24. All right, an avalanche of news, as there always is, on the 30th of March, the second to last day of the month of March. April, right around the corner, folks. House Republicans are apparently fed up. They're finally fed up with Representative Madison Cawthorn. It wasn't, they didn't mind he wanted to bring guns into the Capitol. No, he earned himself a slap on the wrist, a scolding, if you will, on Wednesday from Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy over remarks that he made suggesting that Republican lawmakers had invited him to orgies and used cocaine. Here's MSNBC's Joy Reid and Dr. Jason Johnson having some slightly petty fun at his expense.
Kevin McCarthy finally found something unacceptable to him. He didn't care if you go to a white nationalist rally, you go to a Klan rally. He doesn't care. But he's like, you said in-house we're having orgies with cocaine. Your thoughts?
Look, as far as Kevin McCarthy is concerned, the only white lines we're happy with are the ones that go into MAGA rallies, right? Like, we can't talk about the other ones. Look, this is, I'm not shocked by this because Madison Cawthorn seems like the guy in high school who's always bragging about the girlfriend at the other school that he has that you just haven't seen. Like, remember, this is the same guy who says, I was bringing weapons in during the insurrection and I'm at these wild parties and everything else like that. Matt Gaetz isn't calling him to come hang out. Madison Cawthorn ain't in the cool club. So I think he was probably lying about this. Not to say that there aren't members who may engage in this behavior, but his propensity for running his mouth and exaggerating and conflating what may be stories versus what he actually experiences is a problem for the Republican Party. I'm not surprised that he's been shut down. I'm not surprised that some people are engaging in this activity. I don't think he's getting the phone calls.
I'm sorry, but Jill, listen, if he's not being invited out with Matt Gaetz, it's because he's afraid that he looks so young that he might be competing for the 17-year-olds. Matt Gaetz don't want no competition for the high school girls.
Oh, dear. Joy Reid, Jason Johnson having some fun at the expense of Matt Gaetz and Madison Cawthorn. All right, let's talk about something much more important, I think. The Justice Department announced yesterday it's expanding the January 6th probe to look at the rally prep, financing, inquire into a range of pro-Trump figures. Here's the Washington Post. Jackie Alemany on MSNBC with Chris Hayes last night.
We have learned today that the criminal investigation into the January 6th attack has expanded, probably much to the relief of January 6th lawmakers who are serving on the panel investigating the insurrection, who have been clamoring all week for the Department of Justice to take more action. But we now see the Justice Department actually doing so, trying to determine the full extent of any conspiracy to stop Congress from certifying Joe Biden's electoral victory on January 6th. There is not many details that we've been able to figure out about the actual investigation because it is a grand jury, and grand jury subpoenas are a legal mechanism that are used by prosecutors to gather information for a criminal investigation, but doesn't necessarily mean that any particular recipient is under investigation or will face charges, but it is a start.
It is a start, and most, I think, legal experts are still obviously pretty skeptical of anything actually happening there. But let's move on to another big story. Yesterday, President Biden made an important speech on COVID, asking Congress to pass key COVID aid and warning that U.S. progress is at stake. He also got his second booster after COVID remarks. And here is an edited clip of the highlights from President Biden's speech on where we're at and why the funding is so important.
Because of the strategy we executed over the past year on vaccinations, testing, treatments, and more, we're now in a new moment in this pandemic. Does not mean that COVID-19 is over. It means that COVID-19 no longer controls our lives. That's what it means. But now, just as we've reached the critical turning point in this fight, Congress has to provide the funding America needs to continue to fight COVID-19. Well, we're already seeing the consequences of congressional inaction. And if we fail to invest, we leave ourselves vulnerable if another wave of the virus hits. Even worse, if we need a different vaccine for the future to combat a new variant, we're not going to have enough money to purchase it. We cannot allow that to happen. Congress, we need to secure additional supply now. We can't wait until we find ourselves in the midst of another surge to act. It'll be too late.
Yeah, he's right about that, according to all the experts that I read and talk to. What do you think? Okay, well, how about this? We move on to a couple of other I just wanted to mention the Biden administration expected to announce plans this week to lift an emergency public health order that has restricted immigration at the United States land borders since the onset of the pandemic, according to people familiar with the planning. Also, the Biden administration, President Biden expected to announce a massive release of oil reserves, like 1 million barrels a day, I read, which would be pretty significant. I'm not sure it'd make a dent in gas prices for those of you that are still paying for them at the pump. I, of course, have 2 Chevy Volts using solar power generated by my rooftop. But, you know, I'm an elite shed living podcast host. Did I tell you that my old Chevy Volt started taking a charge again? Yeah, really weird. After about 120,000 miles, almost 12 years, the battery just went dead, and it was going to be really expensive to fix. And it's a plug-in hybrid, so the car still worked. Really interesting, I think, development and weird, and it was very upsetting to me because I loved that I was driving this car mostly on electric. And then after about a year and a half, I plugged it back in. I plugged it in a few times in between just to see, and now it's working again. It's taking a full charge again. It's bizarre. It makes no sense. But now I've got 2 Chevy Volts plug-in hybrids, and I love them both. We also have a Honda CR-V, so we're not completely electric anymore. But okay, so let me move on, and I'm going off on a tangent. That's rare. Let's talk about what's going on in Ukraine. The UN Refugee Agency says now more than 4 million refugees have fled Ukraine since Russian troops invaded the country. Yesterday, news leaking from, on purpose, I would imagine, declassified U.S. intelligence suggesting that President Vladimir Putin has been misinformed by his advisors about the Russian military's struggles in Ukraine and that tensions are growing between Putin and his Ministry of Defense. A top British spy yesterday claimed dejected Russian troops are accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. Let's head into the White House briefing room where White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield on Wednesday took questions about this.
We have information that Putin felt misled by the Russian military, which has resulted in persistent tension between Putin and his military leadership. We believe that Putin is being misinformed by his advisors about how badly the Russian military is performing and how the Russian economy is being crippled by sanctions because his senior advisors are too afraid to tell him the truth. So it is increasingly clear that Putin's war has been a strategic blunder that has left Russia weaker over the long term and increasingly isolated on the world stage.
All right, and then a reporter asked a somewhat weird question to Kate Bedingfield. Here it is.
I'm wondering if this is partially just an effort to embarrass Vladimir Putin, to sort of publicly shame him or something. It comes across as, you know, you say that you can't speak for the Kremlin, but then you're saying he feels misled by his advisors. It seems like there might be something going on here.
No. Our aim is to show that this has been a strategic blunder for Russia, that there is ultimately this is going to leave them weaker. It is not going to leave them stronger. And I think making this information public simply contributes to the picture that strategically they are having to reorganize, to refit. And that shows that, again, this was a terrible decision for them.
Was it just me, or did she not feel very prepared for that question yesterday? That was a weird one. Okay, well, let's go to one more question. There were obviously probably an hour's worth, but here just a couple of the highlights from the briefing yesterday. I think it was NBC's Kirsten Welker asking White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield this question about the former disgraced president reaching out with overtures to the horrible Vladimir Putin, asking for dirt on Joe Biden.
Any reaction to former President Trump calling on Putin to release information about Hunter Biden? Are you concerned about that?
So what I would say about that is, what kind of American, let alone an ex-president, thinks that this is the right time to enter into a scheme with Vladimir Putin and brag about his connections to Vladimir Putin? There is only one, and it's Donald Trump.
All right, there she goes. Well done. She bounced back on that question. And now let's head over to the Pentagon, where Defense Department spokesman John Kirby took a question about what's happening in Kyiv, in Ukraine.
Is it wrong to say that, I mean, you're using the word reposition. I'm trying to understand the situation. Is it wrong to say that Russia withdrew some of its forces from around Kyiv?
They are beginning to move some forces away from Kyiv. If you want to call it withdrawal, I'm not going to argue with you on the verb. I'm using reposition on purpose, because the way it's being spun by the Ministry of Defense is that they're pulling back and they're trying to de-escalate and depressurize the situation, and we just don't believe, we haven't seen any evidence of that right now.
All right, well, we now go from the White House and Defense Department and what's going on in Ukraine to Senator Bernie Sanders, who we haven't heard from in a while. I wanted to play this clip I found of Sanders laying into wealthy Americans. It never gets old to me. Here is the Burn Man.
Anyone who thinks we do not have an oligarchy right here in America is sorely mistaken. Today in America, multi-billionaires like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson are off taking joyrides on their rocket ships to outer space. They're buying $500 million super yachts. And we talk about the yachts that Putin's friends have. Well, guess what? They have them too here in this country, living in mansions with 25 bathrooms. In his budget, the president has proposed a 20% minimum tax on those who are worth at least $100 million.
And if you like that, then you're going to love this. This is Congresswoman Katie Porter yesterday at a House Oversight Committee hearing on Medicare for All. She's got a whole bunch of dollar bills in her hands, and she's going after private insurance company CEOs, a woman named Dr. Collins. I'm not sure which company Collins represented, but this is, she's the vice president of health coverage and access for the Commonwealth Fund, I believe. Anyway, this is like almost 3 minutes, and it's worth all of it. I was kind of cheering as she pointed this out. Dr. Aaron Carroll has made these points over and over over the years. Here she is, heroic Congresswoman Katie Porter.
Dr. Collins, what percentage of revenue do private insurance companies spend on administrative costs?
Between about 17 to 18% of spending in private insurance plans.
So if I pay my insurance company $100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, $17 go to administrative costs. What about Medicare? What do they spend on administrative costs?
That range is about 3 to 5%.
3 to 5%. About 3 to 5%. Right here. And if we look at just billing costs, just billing and insurance costs, Medicare is at 1%. Wait, private companies spend 17 times more on administrative costs than Medicare? What are private insurance companies spending on that Medicare is not? Does Medicare spend hundreds of millions of dollars on television advertisements like private insurance does? Dr. Collins?
No.
Does Medicare spend millions of dollars on stock buybacks to shareholders?
No.
Does Medicare spend money on marketing? Private insurance likes to put its name on stadiums and PGA tournaments. Is there a Medicare arena?
No.
Does Medicare spend $23 million on executive pay like private insurance companies do?
No.
We know how much it costs to run a high-quality health insurance program. $1. Out of $100, research shows that Medicare spends 1.1% on administrative costs. We spend $4 trillion on healthcare every year. We could save $200 billion on administrative costs with Medicare for all. And those savings, they could go to expand Medicare. We could spend that money to let patients see dentists. We could spend that money to let patients pay for hearing aids, to help older adults afford eyeglasses, to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, to finally pay mental health professionals for the work they do. Instead, all this money is wasted. We're not talking about paying to keep the lights on in operating rooms or improving the quality of care. All of this money is used to pay big insurance to push paper. It's death by 200 billion paper cuts.
Woo-wee, Katie Porter laying into private insurance CEOs. I absolutely love that. I should try to get her on the show. She's so good at those hearings, and I'm always rooting for her and those like her speaking truth to power, powerful private insurance companies. In this case, I really like that. All right, finally, fallout over the Academy Awards. Slap heard around the world, as I'm calling it. Do you not like that? Does anybody not like that? Will Smith, of course, slapping Chris Rock on Sunday night at the Oscars. The Variety magazine reporting that Will Smith was apparently asked to leave the Oscars after slapping Chris Rock, but he refused, which is super weird. Well, Chris Rock performed for the first time, apparently, did his first comedy show in Boston since Sunday night's assault, and he got a standing ovation and just started with, how was your weekend? Which thought was pretty funny. He didn't really go into it, though. He said he's still processing what happened, and he went into the stuff he already had prepared. But here is his good friend who came up in the New York comedy scene with him, worked with him for a long time, Wanda Sykes, who sat down with Ellen, who I thought her show got canceled, but I guess she's still on. But I like this, what Wanda Sykes had to say. I love Wanda Sykes, and here it is.
From that moment to when I got to the monitor backstage, I just saw Will leaving the stage and everything was quiet. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? Everybody was like, oh, my God. And then Will just starts cursing, from his seat. Keep your wife, my wife's name, whatever. And I just was like, what is this really happening? And then someone showed me on a video. It was like, yeah, he smacked Chris. And I just felt so awful for my friend, Chris. And it was sickening. It was absolutely, I physically felt ill, and I'm still a little traumatized by it.
Me too.
Yeah, because and for them to let him stay in that room and enjoy the rest of the show and accept his award, I was like, how gross is this? This is just the wrong message, like you assault somebody, you get escorted out the building and that's it, but for them to let him continue, I thought it was gross.
Yeah, I think.
All right, there you go. All right, and I talk more about this with both April Rain and SE Cupp coming up. If that's an issue that a story you're still interested in, I certainly am. But I touch on it with both my guests, and I think you're going to like their perspectives. Very interesting and original. It's hard to have original takes, but I think both of them do. All right, well, I've got a lot more news for you now. That's all the audio, but a whole bunch more stories. I'll give them to you rapid fire, and if you want to look into them more, you can. A menu of stories coming at you, and a great new news dump jingle submitted by voiceover actor, artist, announcer of Stand Up Pete Dominic. Here's Pete Coe with a jingle inspired by a story out of a Portuguese island where there's a whole bunch of dairy cows living and grazing, and thousands of small earthquakes have been rattling this volcanic island called Sao Jorge. Take it away, Pete Coe.
Portuguese island dairy cows, farmers in a huff. There's trembling beneath their feet on today's news dump.
Those poor cows, they must be so scared with the earthquake. Oh, that's a a terrible story. Thank you, though, Pico, for getting us all the hard-hitting, most important stories out there, usually containing animals. All right, well, this is my favorite news of the day. If Ava was able to do good news, I would have had her read this one. A Connecticut judge said Wednesday InfoWars asshole host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones will be fined for each weekday that passes without him appearing for a deposition in a lawsuit brought by relatives of some victims of Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings. To me, he's always going to be one of the hardest ones to figure out how anybody could possibly support him or believe him. I mean, if you don't believe him, which you shouldn't believe him on anything, and you're platforming him like comedian and podcaster Tim Dillon or comedian and podcaster Joe Rogan, then who does that make you? I mean, it's just terrible to in any way normalize this guy who has done some just horrible, horrible guy. Anyway, $25,000 per weekday beginning Friday, and increase by $25,000 per weekday until he appears for his deposition, which is awesome. Judge in a Waterbury, Connecticut Superior Court is heroic for that judgment. How about this? Here's another hero. NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei returned to Earth Wednesday after spending a record-breaking 355 days in low Earth orbit. Vande Hei shared a spacecraft with two Russian cosmonauts as tensions between Russia and U.S. continue amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Reportedly, there weren't really any tensions on the space station. However, the Russian cosmonauts did annex Vande Hei's bunk before he even left, which I think was a bit aggressive. Sad news from legendary actor Bruce Willis' family, who announced that Bruce Willis had been diagnosed with aphasia and is stepping away from his career due to the diagnosis. The 67-year-old actor's wife and ex-wife, his daughters, all shared a photo of him on Instagram on Wednesday with a lengthy message on his health. Love Bruce Willis. Really sorry to hear that. But, man, he's a legend, right? Positive drug tests among U.S. workers hits a 2-decade high. Fewer employers tested applicants for marijuana last year than in 2020 as companies grappled with nationwide labor shortages. But the amount of people who apparently tested positive for marijuana, I should mention that here at Stand Up with Pete Dominic, if you test negative, you're actually frowned upon. So, no, I'm kidding. I don't think anybody should be smoking the cannabis, doing the cannabis if they don't like it. There's no need for it. Enjoy your natural highs. Do the cardio. That's a natural high. Anyway, let's see. What else do I have for you? The terrible Arizona governor, his name is Ducey, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. He signed a bill banning gender-affirming care and trans student athletes yesterday. Hard to imagine that this is where we're at in America, but another transgender sports ban in Oklahoma also signed into law on Wednesday. Ducey also signed into law a bill outlawing abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. So he covered all the culture war issues and made some major changes in his state, which is terrible. I really hope there's a backlash as a result of these types of things in Arizona. All right, what else do I have for you? Let's head down to Florida, where they secured $860 million from CVS and others to settle an opioid case. CVS drugstore company, pharmaceutical companies are going to be paying Florida a combined $860 million, another major multi-$100 million settlement. This is good news. There are now more Mexican gray wolves roaming the southwestern U.S. That would have been interesting if I misspoke and said southeastern and misinformed you. No, they are in the southwestern U.S. that any time since the federal government started reintroducing the endangered species of predators, growth slows for endangered Mexican gray wolf population. And the CDC announced they're dropping travel warnings for cruise ships. The CDC Wednesday ending its tiered warning system for COVID-19 on cruise ships. And the World Health Organization has unveiled a plan to end the global COVID-19 emergency in 2022. So does that mean it's going to end this year? Is it really happening? What are we to think? President Biden, well, here's one more. I didn't see this earlier. President Biden said to invoke the Defense Production Act as early as this week to step up production of minerals used to manufacture electric vehicle batteries. How about that? I think that's a really interesting story. I want to talk more about that with somebody. Texas A&M offering Ukrainian students full tuition and room and board. How about that, Texas A&M? Good on you. And finally, a Congressional Naming Commission announced Wednesday that it will review more than 750 Department of Defense items to determine whether their names commemorate the Confederacy. The full list of items under review includes everything from military bases to stickers and flyers. And this is a really interesting piece of news and development. And I'm very happy to see this. Very cool. I want to talk to somebody on that commission. All right, well, that's all I've got for you in the news dump. Lots of headlines there, and now it's time to get to my guests. So, shall we? Joining me later is April Rain, who I have had some of my favorite conversations on this podcast with, several in the past, maybe 3 or 4, and this one is no exception. I think you're going to really enjoy my conversation with April, who is always enlightening, always pushes back thoughtfully on things when I get them wrong, or when she hears me getting them wrong, at least, and I just love talking to her. So that's coming up. But first, I've got CNN's S.E. Cupp. She's also, of course, a columnist at the Daily News. She's on the board of the nonprofit foundation Inara. She is awesome on Twitter and Instagram, and you can watch her all the time on CNN. I think I mentioned that. And the first, I think, 3 minutes, the audio was clipping a little bit, but I fixed it and went to a different audio feed, and she sounds great, like we're in the same room. And also, she was wearing a heavy, thick black sweater, and her black lab was sitting next to her, and at the end of it, we talk about that. But we start with the weather, which I normally don't. If I'm going to talk about it, I wouldn't even keep in the interview. Right? I hate small talk about the weather, but I went for it. Here we go. S.E. Cupp right now. There she is. S.E. Cupp joining me. Very excited to talk to you. Lots of questions.
Yeah.
Are you taking a picture of us?
Yeah.
Cool. Who are you wearing?
For the gram. Doing it for the gram.
Who are you wearing? There's a heavy winter turtleneck sweater that looks like the kind of item you put away 3 weeks ago and then had to pull back up.
100%. It is so effing cold this week. After like some nice normal temperatures, spring temperatures, I had to break my whole winter closet back out.
I'm a guy who hates people complaining about winter that live in the Northeast. I'm a guy who loves winter, and I'm also now a guy who's so angry that it's still happening.
I love winter too, but everything has a time and place.
Right.
It is now the time and place for fucking spring. It is spring. It's officially spring. Winter, go back to where you came from. I'm fine. I'm fine when it's happening as it should be. I'm not fine when it shouldn't be happening.
Well said. Very well said. It's almost as if we had a script prepared for that subject. I want to ask you about media topic choices. You hosted and produced your own TV show. You've done it all. You've been behind the camera, writer, producer, newspaper, all of it. How do you decide kind of what's most important to discuss? Obviously.
Why are you asking me this? Oh. Because I just had this conversation with my editors. Why are you asking me this?
I'm asking you specifically because I think reasonable people can disagree on who's most interested and and how much we should be discussing the slap heard around the world. And I think it matters to some people more than others. And I think some people my opinion is a lot of people are dismissing it. And I've been arguing specifically with white progressives who are saying, what about Ukraine? What about Ginny Thomas text? And I'm like, those are hugely important, but let's be real. So that's where it's coming from.
Good. So I'm glad we got to, I don't have to answer that actual question because it's not interesting, but I get why you're asking it now. And I was going through this exact same thing with my editor. Like, are people still interested in the slap? Because I'm really interested in the slap and I'd like to keep talking about it. And there were pros and cons. There were voices who said, yes, we need more on it. There were voices who said, no, we don't. And also voices who said, we don't need like a white woman's voice on it. And I've gotten a little of that response when I've talked about it. And like when I've talked about it being traumatizing and kind of awful to watch, and like you, I'll get people who'll say, "Did you watch the insurrection?" Yeah, yes, I did, and covered it. Yep, also covered it, and also was traumatized. Yep, that was a terrible thing to witness. And yeah, what's your point? Like, what's the point of the whataboutism around this issue? And it is, I think, a way of dismissing it, and how awful it was to watch on live television an assault and then the aftermath of no one doing anything about it.
Right.
It was so disorienting and jarring, I thought.
So the other question, though, is it's a fair question, an editorial question on how we decide what to talk about, how much to talk about it, and whether it's an hour TV, what block, where it comes from, how long, who gets booked, or it's a column of yours in the Daily News. And so how do you justify talking? How do you justify writing your most recent piece, I think, the Daily News, was Will Smith's slap the Oscars' last grasp? Like, how do you, and by the way, it's fair. I think it's also important that people say sometimes ideas come from editors and producers. They're actually assigned to you. Like, you don't, when you go on CNN for panel on a show, Jake Tapper, you're not necessarily in charge of deciding what the topic is. You're like, yeah, I can talk about that.
Yeah, that's not the case for my column. For my column, I don't run it by anyone generally. I'll run it by my editor when I think he might be inundated with a topic and say, like, could you use one more, or, should I move on to something else? But usually I just send my column before even checking. So I write what I want, and that is a luxury and a freedom that I had to earn over many, many years of writing constantly for this editor, and assuring him that I can churn out relevant, unique content on the stuff people want to hear about in this particular publication and now, for national syndication. So I have that luxury. I don't have that luxury for like Unfiltered, which I do on CNN. I don't have that luxury, as you said, when I go into panels and kind of have to talk to what they want. But I knew that even on Tuesday, which is when the Daily News column came out, there would still be talk about the slap. And it doesn't mean I'm ignoring Ukraine. I've also talked about Ukraine, right? Like, doesn't mean I can only fill my brain with one story at a time. And just because I've written about it doesn't mean I think it's the most important story of our time. I don't. But it's really chewy. And there's so many takes on it. And I think people have so many thoughts on it. And they're still coming out. There's still new takes, fresh takes, different things being said and written about it. So, I mean, I think it really captivated people.
Well, it certainly captivated people. And I agree with everything you said about, I like the word chewy, because there's just so many different, I think what you mean by that is angles to interpret it from, an interest to interpret it from. And I also think this is one of those great examples of where we all witnessed a thing and we have different points of view on it, often based on our own life experience. What do you say about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up watching a lot of assault in real life, luckily, but a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Whether, at school, in your home, in your love life. And I can imagine that was a little triggering, or maybe not at all, right? Maybe that was like nothing to some people. And I think a lot of people clearly believe that Chris Rock was wronged, but a surprising number of people think that Will Smith was right. And, to have that take, I don't dismiss it. It's not my opinion, but I don't dismiss it because I think so much of this could be cultural. And, I tend to side with comedians and speech and like, that's where I come from. So that's my bias, right? Where I naturally, instinctively come from. I also just think there's no good reason to hit someone ever, unless like self-defense. So, I mean, we're all bringing a lot to it. And that's not even addressing like Jada's perspective and where Jada came from in that. And her defense of her husband and her medical situation. I mean, there's just so much going into this split-second moment between three people that had a long history, and there's lots of background and context. I mean, it's incredibly rich as a moment, in terms of like socio-cultural implications, I think.
Yeah. Yes. What else did I want to ask you about that? I don't know. Your piece is really interesting in terms of how it reflects the Academy Awards show and the future of it, because there's so many controversial issues about, well, all these award shows, the Golden Globes, which is, I guess, the Hollywood Foreign Press, the Oscars, which is the Academy, and who's voting and, who gets votes. I mean, there's a lot of that. So what is the point that you're making about the future of this award show or the Academy itself?
Well, I think the Academy made a lot of bad decisions on that day, and some of them started before the slap. I mean, I loved watching the Oscars as a kid. And the Billy Crystal era, I think he hosted it like 6 times, was the pinnacle. And it was quite literally the pinnacle. 1998 was the last... the highest rated Oscars was Billy Crystal, and it's plummeted since then. 50-something million people watched in 1998. On Sunday, about 15 million people watched, and last year only just under 10. So to me, that was the heyday, and it was so fun and inspiring and creative and funny, and it was an escape, and I think so much has changed, and now the Oscars have become a bit pedantic. They've become a bit insular, a bit self-indulgent. They've become social commentary, and none of the reasons I tuned in, and I think most people tuned in. And so it is not must-see TV. And if you really wanted to be turned off, I mean, this was the Oscars to turn you off. This was, maybe the last straw. So I hope they rework it, rejigger it, and bring back some of the things that made it good.
I want to ask you about some of these other huge stories. Your take on the reporting from Costa and Woodward about, first, they got 2 huge scoops, I guess, this week. Probably. Does that mean they come from like similar sources because they're so close together? Or does it? I don't know if it matters if they're just great reporters. But first, the first one is Clarence Thomas's wife Ginny's text, which you've had a lot to say about, which is, I think, so important. What are your thoughts on how that should be investigated, what the consequences are? Should he recuse himself or even, as some have said, call for his resignation?
Perhaps. I mean, it might be that bad. And we should, as journalists, investigate it. And then if Congress needs to investigate or DOJ needs to investigate, like that, all of that should happen. The texts were that bad. And, he's had direct rulings on these issues. And so, yes, it should be investigated. What I find so fascinating, because I'm a conservative who, swims in DC circles, and we have known for years of Ginny Thomas's political leanings and her wacko-ness. I mean, we've known about it for so long. And even though she's been able to monetize, her politics and her connections, i.e. her husband, plenty of people have said no to her. Like plenty of conservative groups and, bodies have said, this is too conflicting. You're too crazy. And so I'm actually amazed that folks like Mark Meadows and folks in the White House allowed her to be as close to them as they did, like to be able to text them. And obviously she was in contact with them. That's shocking because she was well-known. She was a well-known entity and was mostly dismissed. Another thing that some people might not know is she admits she had been in a cult in the 80s. It's called LifeSpring. And LifeSpring says it is not a cult. That's important to note. But she says very clearly they used culty practices to get her to cut off contacts with her friends and her family and work and all of that. And she was really traumatized by it. And it's just so interesting that like 30 years later, if you read some of these texts, you could say she did it again. She yet again is part of a cult.
It's sad. I feel like I've talked with you about Stephen Hassan's work before, but it's sad when people are vulnerable to those kinds of beliefs. And I'm not going to say they're necessarily preyed upon or targeted, but to some extent they are. But it seems like she has gone down that road throughout her life. And apparently who is it that wrote about a deep dive? Was it Jane Maher or somebody wrote a deep dive about her? Apparently her parents were also pretty way out there on their beliefs outside the mainstream. Do I have that right? I think
it was Jane in the New Yorker.
No, but what her family and some of their beliefs, like she never had a chance.
Yeah, there are certain kinds of people who are ripe for this, and to an extent they are preyed upon, but to another extent they seek it. And I think it takes a big leap to go from like Tea Party conservative to QAnon conservative. It's a big leap, and lots of people have made it. But I think she was always kind of caught up in the conspiracy wing, the fringy wing. She was always naturally kind of into that. And of course it was going to become problematic for her husband and vice versa. Of course it was. And I'm not at all surprised that she did what she did on January 6th. Frankly, I'm surprised they let her, is, the point I was.
It sounds like, when I ask you the consequences and what should be done, you hedged, which was the, I think, smart thing to do, because what you said, I think your answer was journalists and Congress should do an investigation and find out what's there before we start making pronouncements, which, again, I think reasonable people could disagree. Some people might say, there's enough in those texts from December. Who knows what we'll find out on January 6th? I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying is like, let's wait till the investigation happens.
Let's do an investigation. Let's investigate it. I'm not saying that there's no, relevance to Clarence Thomas here. I don't know if there is. We should find out. We should definitely find out. But I think what happened with the Hunter Biden story is journalists decided there's no there. I know many journalists, including at my network, who said this story is a lie. This story is Russian propaganda. And immediately said, and it has nothing to do with Joe Biden. Why? Because Joe Biden was running for president. I don't know if it had nothing to do with Joe Biden. And the story was real. The story was true. It didn't have to have an impact on Joe Biden. But I really think journalists should have investigated it before they determined its relevance and importance and like where it was on the spectrum of scandal. So I feel the same about this. Like, it should definitely be investigated. There's enough there to investigate it. And it could end up being very problematic.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with that story to even comment about it. So agree with you and move on. I don't even know. I'm not sure what the accusation is even.
Well, they found Hunter Biden's laptop abandoned at a computer store, fixing business in Delaware. And there was not only some compromising personal video and pictures and stuff on it, but some emails that were ethically compromising in terms of his dealings with Burisma and Ukraine and some of his businesses. And, him being the son of a very powerful person, like Ginny being the wife of a very powerful person, I think would warrant some investigation as to whether there had been conflicts, whether Hunter Biden was using his connections to his dad and using his dad to get close with certain foreign officials and business deals. I mean, that there was enough to look at that, but journalists really just dismissed it, called it fake, literally called it fake news, and said it was Russian invention. And why? For what reason? Why would you decide there's no story there? And it's really come back to bite them, because now, like, the New York Times is admitting now that it was real, it was a real story, and sorry, we effed up. I just don't see the need for it. And so I'm only bringing that up because for Ginny Thomas, who is also the wife of a, powerful person, there's enough there to investigate and want to know more, and we should.
Fair enough. I should look more into it myself. I appreciate you bringing that up. All right, let me ask you about another piece that you wrote at the Daily News. The Ass and His Purchaser, Putin's American Pals.
I'm really proud of that title.
Was that your idea?
That was my headline, because that's the name of an Aesop fable. That I didn't invent it. The Ass and His Purchaser.
Oh, I should have known. I mean, I knew that.
Yeah, of course. Who doesn't? No, I was really proud of that, because it's so illustrative, but it's also a real thing. But I use that metaphor of the Aesop's fable, the Ass and His Purchaser, to really talk about this idea, whether it's like you can judge a person by his friends, or Garth Brooks, I have friends in low places. Like that's the theme. That's the theme. And if you look at folks on Fox and...
Yeah, let me read it, because I have right in front of me. A man is known by the company he keeps, as he writes in the Daily News. The origin of that well-worn line is a fable by Aesop called, fittingly, The Ass and His Purchaser. As it goes, a man brings a new donkey home, and when he sees that it chooses to sidle up next to, quote, the laziest and greediest beast in the stable, the man tries to return the donkey, saying, I could see what sort of beast he is from the companion he chose for himself. The Bible, you write, is replete with similar riffs on this theme. Proverbs, how do you say that, 13:20? I don't know how to say it. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. And then you mentioned the Garth Brooks. I've got friends in low places. But you say the point is, if the new resident scholars of the American far right are to be known by the company they keep, they're not only associated with fools, they've got friends in the lowest places, the Kremlin, to be exact. This is probably one of the most important issues, certainly in media. Tell me about who you're talking about and who they're associated with.
I think if you're getting praise from Vladimir Putin, you're doing it wrong as a member of the media. And we should point out he executes members of the media and exiles them and imprisons them and poisons them. So if you're getting plaudits and praise from the Kremlin, you're probably doing it wrong. But they are. Tucker Carlson is being played on repeat on Russian state television. Lara Logan, used to be a normal journalist and has gone insane, is being praised by Russian official diplomats. There are others, and this should be deeply troubling to them. It doesn't seem to be, because they keep doing it and seem to be proud of this, but they're parroting Russian agitprop and doing it to slam Ukraine, slam Biden, slam the U.S., which is exactly what Putin wants. I mean, that's so useful. It's invaluable for him to have an American, quote unquote, journalist doing his propaganda for him. It's not surprising they're eating it up. What's surprising is that these folks keep doing it.
You write, just imagine how do you say the word, ignominy?
Ignominy, yeah.
Just imagine the ignominy of being Hitler's favorite cable news host, or Saddam's favorite political analyst, or Pol Pot's favorite Pol. Imagine being used for propaganda that's helping to invade a sovereign nation and murder thousands of innocent people. Imagine being this wrong about the world. That is such a great and powerful kind of historical perspective to look at how media would have been during those awful men's regimes.
Yeah,
so
I mean, we didn't have Fox News during Hitler, right? Or Newsmax or whatever. But I think it's important to draw those historical comparisons, because there's no difference. I mean, Putin is using what they are doing and what they are saying to justify a criminal, illegal war, an invasion of a sovereign nation, and the murder of thousands of Ukrainians and his own people, as well, his own troops. And if you don't have that insight and that sense of responsibility with your words, I think you're you're obviously on the wrong side of history, and I just don't know how you sleep at night. Like, I don't know how Lara Logan sleeps at night knowing she's parroting insane Russian propaganda, conspiracy theories that the Ukrainian soldiers are Nazis and that they're satanic cultists, you know, all this anti-Semitic stuff. I mean, she's really in territory here. But I don't know how you sleep at night knowing exactly what you're being used for.
Oh, that's, you know, it's because I think it's like when we say things like that, I don't know how you sleep at night. It's because you're looking at it through your prism. Like, they're probably fine. Like,
yeah.
They don't have our values or interpretations. I don't know. It's hard to imagine how they don't. I think that's also what you're saying. Like, how can they not realize this? Or do they realize? And I guess they're okay with it.
I mean, obviously people justify beliefs and justify their causes, justify conspiracy theories. I mean, the mind is a very powerful thing. So obviously they justify it. But like, Lara Logan, I think, is actually insane. I think she's mentally ill. Tucker, I think, is very smart and calculated. And I'm not even sure he believes what he's saying. So that, to me, beggars the question, like, how does he sleep at night? I think Lara Logan probably sleeps fine because she really believes this stuff. I don't know that Tucker even does.
I think the answer sometimes, and I'm being facetious, but how does Tucker Carlson sleep at night? On a pile of money.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, you know, it's like Ted Cruz or other, just people who are kind of valueless. They only care about themselves, Trump and his family. Like, they just don't really have values
the money
outside.
And like, because I know about this, there's a thing called Fox Famous, and it's, you know, you're super famous at Fox and inside Fox. And obviously Tucker's famous worldwide, but like, there are lots of people are Fox famous and then famous nowhere else. Like, you wouldn't, if you were not in the Fox bubble, you wouldn't know who some of these people are, but they think they're like celebrities. But I think the Fox fame gets to you too. It's not just the money. It's knowing how influential you are, and especially leading primetime coverage and having the ear of the president or the ear of Vladimir Putin or, you know, whatever it is, I think can be intoxicating for people for sure and motivating.
And it's so well said. And it's such a dangerous place to be. And yet there are so many people that have the ear of the vast majority of reporters and journalists, let's say, don't abuse that and keep a wall of separation, you know, from them, much less celebrities, from Jon Stewart to Jake Tapper to anybody else. I mean, there's a lot of, I generally think they don't abuse that kind of influence and power that they have. It doesn't go to their head or their.
You have to not care. Someone said this to me a long time ago, and it was so liberating, that it is not my job to be liked. And that's harder as an opinion columnist, because obviously we want fans. We need fans. If no one's reading us or watching us, we don't exist. Our opinion isn't important. But for the half of me that is also a journalist, like, it's not my job to be liked. And it really isn't my job to be liked by people in power. And so you have to not care that you're not going to be on the White House Christmas card list that year or for the next 4 years. Or you have to not care that, like, such and such late night host is going to, you know, attack you or criticize you. You have to not care about that. And it's
I don't agree with that. I care deeply about people liking me. But the other thing is, like, you've proven that over and over, and I wish that this wasn't a compliment, but you have taken just about everybody to task, including people you call friends, very publicly, and I have utmost respect for that. 'Cause most people generally don't do that, and for obvious reasons, as I think you just stated. But that's obviously problematic when you're a journalist, when you're a commentator with the kind of platform that SE Cupp has. So I applaud you for that. And for the last thing that I wanted to ask you about, which I always like to talk about, mental health stuff. I thought of you the other day when I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Dan Harris, 10% Happier. And his guest was talking about something you and I already know, but I just always want to talk about. When you talk publicly about your mental health challenges, it helps people. It's easy to think that people are just trying to get attention, or they're just, you know, talking to get it off their own chest, which one might argue you can do that privately. But when done publicly, there is a ton of research and data that says it really helps. And more people are doing this, led by, I think, folks like you. So I ask you, as I often do, how are you doing? And then we can talk about the kind of the point I was making about why that's important to share.
I am okay. This news cycle, the war, has been challenging, but I'm so much more prepared, so much better prepared for it than I would have been before I got help and treatment for anxiety and before I learned how to ingest terrible news and do it, professionally and do it constantly. So I'm okay. It's a challenge to cover this story. And I have colleagues overseas doing the hard work, but who I talk to, and I am on a board of an organization that cares for children in war conflict zones. And so that's
Inara. Is that
Inara? Yeah.
Inara, yeah. Great organization.
It is great. And we've mostly focused on Syria, Yemen, Turkey, Lebanon. Now we're obviously focused on Ukrainian children. And so that's tough too. It's not just the news, it's actual events and people.
Inara, INARA.org, International Network for Aid, Relief, and
Literally
Assistance.
everything you give goes to medical services, life-saving medical care for children in war zones. That's all we do. It's not political. We're not advocating for policy. We're literally connecting children with doctors and hospitals and getting them life-saving care because they're, the most vulnerable victims of war. So it's a great organization, but it's been, challenging on, obviously on my mental health.
Yep.
I'm not trying to say that's more important than what they're going through, obviously, but we're talking about mental health. And so I'm way better prepared to deal with all of this now that I have tools and therapy and, medication, all the things that I'm doing to take care of myself. I'm in a much better place. It's still challenging, but I'm really well equipped now.
Have you learned anything new lately about coping mechanisms? Have you had any experiences? Have you any new addition to your practice?
It's important, and I've shared this, to remember that nothing's going to change if you aren't watching the news, if you aren't tweeting about it or writing about it. It's still going to be going on, and you're not going to save the day just because you're watching it constantly. And there is that urge, I think in the beginning especially, to watch constantly and take it all in and want to feel informed and want to emote and empathize and sympathize and do something. And I have to do something. And what can I do? All of that's important, but you're allowed to turn it off. You're allowed to get on with your life. It's okay to take a break, from it. It doesn't mean you don't care.
Yes, that's good. I like it. Giving yourself permission to get away from it. It's so important. Yeah, I need that myself. S.E. Cupp, I'll let you go, but
so fun.
Really
Thank you as always for having me and having my Dolly Parton is next to me here.
Oh, your black lab.
Yeah. Thanks for letting her join. She was very happy to sit in on this.
How old is Dolly, and did you name her after you were talking about your dog?
Yeah. Yeah. She's 2 years old. We got her during COVID.
Oh.
And I named her Dolly Parton because I love Dolly Parton and I want her to have all of her best attributes.
You think naming your animal after a human is a tribute to the human, right? Because some people might think, well, I don't know if that's flattering.
Of course it's a tribute. I love my dog. My dog is my family. And
great. I want you to meet. Well, great. I'd love for you to meet S.E. Cupp.
What is that puppy's name?
That's Indy.
Indy. Oh my gosh.
Did you hear that? I'm sure you heard that there was a huge, as you guys adopted during the pandemic, and there was like a run on animals, especially dogs.
Yeah, especially shelter dogs.
For obvious reasons. And I just read a headline. Horrible. I can't believe I'm laughing. People are now returning those animals because in certain situations, I'm sure it's just not pragmatic. They're not home. They can't take care of especially dogs. But I read that headline this week. It was just so heartbreaking. I'm like, you basically rented an animal for a little while and it made you feel good, and then you sent it back. Oof.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah, like the buyer's remorse.
The question to your family is, will you be keeping Dolly?
Dolly will be with us forever. Yes, she's a perfect puppy. We are thrilled to have her. She's brought so much joy to our family. We will not be returning her.
Can she make an appearance on camera or at all, or no? She's down there. Okay. See if we can get her. There's Dolly Parton, everybody.
A good girl.
All right, Essie, thank you so much for talking to me. I always appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. My pleasure.
All right, there she goes, S.E. Cupp, everybody. Isn't she great? I love that conversation, and I always love catching up with her. We've become such good friends, and I'm always so appreciative when we sit down and talk. We always cover a lot of ground, so that was really good. Let her know that you heard her here on the show. Please go on Twitter, and she mentioned the Gram. She shared some pictures of us on Instagram, too. Go follow her as well there. All right, now it's time to get to my friend April Rain on Twitter at Reign of April. Hashtag Oscars so white. Hashtag She Will Rise. She is a creator and co-founder also of Sister SCOTUS, which is an initiative to get a black woman put on the Supreme Court as promised by Joe Biden. And I talk about all of it, what happened at the Oscars, Judge Ketanji Brown, and so much more. I think you're going to really like my conversation with April Rain. Check her out at reignofapril.com. Hire her. Follow her on Twitter. Here we go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there she is. It's been way too long since we had one of our awesome conversations. April Rain, I'm so happy to have you back. Thank you, Tina Winsett, for suggesting that I reach out to you. Thank you.
Yes, look at the power of Twitter. I am happy to be back.
So I have so much to talk with you about, April, and I think I want to start with the Supreme Court, with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I've already told people about the She Will Rise movement / organization a little bit. But how have you been involved? What have you been doing? What has this journey been like to get us here?
Sure. So She Will Rise and sisterscotus.org was started in summer of 2020. So we are not new to this. We are true to this. My friend Kim Tignor reached out to me and 2 other Black women and said, this is going to be a thing. Let's organize, because we knew that once a nomination happened, once a vacancy became available on the Supreme Court, it would be too hard to galvanize interest and support at that time. So we've been working for the past year and a half on this. There was a petition with thousands and thousands of names, initially to just say to President Biden, please keep your campaign promise and nominate a Black woman. He obviously did so. And now we've been working with other organizations around the country to mobilize and galvanize that support for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. You can see, your listeners and audience can see I'm wearing my She Will Rise shirt today in support of the movement. We know that the actual vote will happen. I think it moves out of committee on the 4th, on April 4th, so it's coming up very soon. And so hopefully we will have a final result by the end of the first week in April.
Are you selling those shirts?
Yes, people can get them on districtclothing.com. Thank you for asking. Or go to the Sister SCOTUS, SISTASCOTUS.org site and get them there. They can also sign the petition. They can also check out our federal judiciary tracker. So we know that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is going to be the first Black woman confirmed to the Supreme Court, but there are other Black women within the judicial pipeline who are also waiting for their nominations to be confirmed. In some cases, it's been months for no reason whatsoever. Some people in the Senate are stalling. And so you can track what's going on throughout the federal judiciary there at sisterscotus.org.
Did you have recommendations, names of actual nominees, justices, people that you would, Black women that you would want to see be nominees, because they don't necessarily have to be judges? Was there criteria? Because you shared a tweet at Reign of April, basically, you're not always necessarily endorsing things, but basically saying that, now I can't find it, that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson would be the first Black Supreme Court justice on the court since Thurgood Marshall to serve. And before you try to correct me with your thinky thoughts, I know what I tweeted. Thanks for understanding in advance. Sorry for a long-winded question, but the criteria. I mean, we have a Black justice. You could be nominating Candace Owens.
No, we could not. So we're absolutely criteria. And so let's start with the real stuff, right? We know that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will be the first justice who has public defender experience. And we believe that's incredibly important, right? Because everyone, regardless of the crime that they are alleged to have committed, deserves strong and vibrant representation. And so taking on that, public defenders do not make a lot of money. So this was not a money grab for her. This is her saying that she understands the importance that all people should be represented well, right? So that was very important. The fact that I'm looking at, there's Washington Post put out a wonderful little infographic, I guess, that shows the distinctions between her and the other current justices on the bench. So she was a district judge, which only one other, Judge Sotomayor, was also previously before being a justice. She was a Court of Appeals judge. She was also on the Sentencing Commission. And that matters because the Sentencing Commission says, if you commit this crime, and you are convicted, this is the time that you're going to spend behind bars.
They come up with the recommendations for the sentencing project.
And that's huge, because what we're talking about here is lived experience, which is why we don't claim Clarence Thomas for many, many reasons. Not the least of which his wife is treasonous, but that's a story.
Yeah, I mean, but for long.
But it's also why we don't claim Candace Owens, right? We know that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has more judicial experience than 4 of the current justices on the court combined. That's important. And so, yes, there were specific things that we were looking for. It was wonderful, to use a little older phrase that President Biden had a binder full of very qualified Black women who could have ascended to this spot. But I am thrilled with his choice.
What were you looking for? What were some of the kind of, prior decisions, much less qualities in a justice, and how does she fit the bill?
She fits the bill perfectly. What I think we were looking for is someone who clearly, through her opinions, applies the law fairly and compassionately and brings her whole authentic self to the position. Justice Sotomayor does in her decision making. Representation matters, and it matters not just for little kids who may one day want to grow up and become a Supreme Court justice. It also matters for those people who are standing before a bench, or whose legal representation is standing before a bench and has their life in the balance. So someone who understands the distinctions, the issues that people of color go through, that women go through, is incredibly important.
Say more about representation mattering. This is a big part of your work as a consultant. And, I'm in the fight right now in our local Board of Education and against the anti-CRT people. And what they're saying is that DEI is just code for CRT. One of the big arguments I've been trying to make is leave race out of this if you can. We're talking about diversity of a wide range of things, even outside of, ethnicity. We're talking about developmental disabilities, learning disabilities, and other issues like that. Why does representation matter, not only on the court here, but just if you would, about schools? Help me.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful to hear that. There should be more people, regular citizens like you and me, getting involved on the local level. We see what's happening in Florida with the crazy Don't Say Gay bill. This is another reason why representation matters. And so especially right now, when we see that there is a crackdown on diversity of thought and diversity of experience, that we, regular citizens, should get involved with our local school board, with, city council, all of those things, whether you are testifying before them or actually have a seat at the board. When my kids were younger in elementary and middle school, I was the liaison between our local PTA and the school board. So, and it's not any money or very little money, but it's only like an hour or two out of a month, and it makes a significant difference for your kids. When I talk about diversity, and I've even moved on from the word diversity to inclusion, which I think is where we should try to be, it needs to be inclusion of all underrepresented communities, of all marginalized communities. So not just race, for sure, but also gender identity and sexual orientation and disability, both visible and invisible, and First Nation status, Native Americans, peoples in this country. It's incredibly important that everyone, because if we are represented in society, in this country, then we should have representation from our elected and appointed officials. Again, just so that you can understand what the importance is and so that you can tamp down some of the craziness that we are hearing about, your kid shouldn't go to school with my kid and shouldn't share the same bathroom or what have you. What I know, and I'm sure, Pete, what you know with kids around, the same age, is that the kids get it. My daughter a couple of years ago, when she was in high school, said, "Hey, you remember Samantha, in my English class?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Okay, well, now Samantha goes by Trevor, and they are in transition." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "And also, I'm going to have a math test on Friday." Like, that was the end of the conversation. Nobody was screaming, or "I can't understand this," or "I want to transfer schools." It was just the reality of who we are in this nation. And so I think we all need to be more open-minded and take our cues from people who are more inclusive than we are. And very often that's the younger generation.
Yeah, for sure. But while you say that about our kids get it, I think in certain communities and in certain, with certain kids, they'll say at worst, it's like, I'm not even thinking about their gender identity, whatever they want to be called, whatever they identify as is fine with me. I don't care. At best, they're allies and advocates, but at worst, these kids are being marginalized, discriminated against, and bullied not only by other classmates, but by maybe adults in the school or in the community, and you're actually seeing that. And so when it comes to these programming initiatives, that's, I feel like, why it's important. Because yes, what you said is true, obviously, of a more enlightened generation of young people, but it doesn't mean that kids aren't going to be bullied for just about anything, by the way. I mean, there's a rumor that in my daughter's middle school, kids are making a list of the ugliest kids. I mean, like, it matters that there's somebody there to kind of combat and create safe spaces. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. And to be clear, there have always been and will always be bullies. And that comes from insecurity. I'm sure you remember, I think I'm a little older than you. I'm sure you remember slam books and all the rest of that, and I mean, I remember we used to do like big mums and corsages for football games, right? And so it was a big deal if you got called to the office to get your mom and you would wear it all day. And so those girls who didn't receive one felt a little bad, right? And so all of that's just a part of growing up. And it's unfortunate. Sure. What we also know is that bullying begins at home, right? Kids have to learn to be racist or bigoted or discriminatory, and they're getting that from their parents, which is unfortunate. And so what we also need to do is provide language for kids who want to be more inclusive, to go back and say, "Hey, Mom, I want to play with John, who is queer or whatever, because he's my friend. And why is it a problem?" Right? This starts at middle school age, if not younger. If we're waiting until high school to teach or unteach our kids things, it's way too late.
Getting back to Sister SCOTUS and back to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, how do you? I mean, I should have reached out to you weeks ago to talk about this, obviously, but I'm glad we're having this conversation now that it's over in a way, so we can look back so I can get your reaction to it. How did you feel that she was treated by Democratic senators? Some people said they treated her well, they asked her good questions, but at times they certainly didn't defend her enough. What was your feeling first about the Democrats on the committee and how they treated her?
I'm incredibly thankful for Senator Cory Booker, who took that moment in the middle of the confirmation hearings to lift her up when I am sure that she was feeling burdened and heavy laden, and sort of reframed where we were and infused joy into the process. I think overall the Democrats were fine. I'm a lifelong registered Democrat. I'm blue and Dem all the way. And I wish we had more of a spine. Throughout, not just with this confirmation process. I think about what's going on with January 6th. I think about what's going on with Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginny. And we can see that there is treason afoot, that the democracy is in a shambles, unfortunately. And it feels like we don't, Democrats, and I'm talking about Congress, both, Senate and House, don't do enough to protect democracy. And I feel like, similarly, they did not do enough to protect Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was happy that Senator Durbin very often would say, you're mentioning this, but I didn't see you proposing any legislation, that would actually counter this. And I think that's great. It's in the record, but we need more vocal and bold support.
One of the things I often think about is how Black women represent such a small percentage of America, much less the electorate, but they've done such a disproportionate amount of work. Forget about the rest of American history in the last few years to get Democrats elected, specifically, obviously, Joe Biden and arguably two senators in Georgia. That was led by a lot of Black women. But people make the argument, well, there's such a small percentage of actual Americans, why do they seem to be getting, too much representation or, specifically with this Black justice. What do you say to that?
Too much representation is hilarious. How many Black women Supreme Court justices do we have? 0. How many have we ever had? 0 in 233 years. How many Black women senators do we have? How many Black, and so we can go all the way down the line. We can talk about, and it's not just politics. How many Black women CEOs are there? Mm-hmm. How many Black women are there leading in the tech industry?
Academy Award winners.
Right. I mean, all of that. How many Black women tenured professors are there, right? And so, yes, we carry this country on our back. Whenever change is being made, we are right there in the forefront. We don't receive the credit that we should. We don't receive the representation that we should. But we do this without credit, without monetary reward, at the threat of losing our home and our families and our jobs and all the rest of that, because we believe that this country can and should be better. I would argue that Black women are the most patriotic group of people in this country because we are literally willing to put our lives on the line.
Really interesting argument, and good luck with that branding. It would be really interesting to see that kind of idea actually take hold, because as you were talking about it, I was thinking Black women are really American, and I guess patriotic is kind of the same thing in terms of what you've been responsible for, even though you're such a small segment of the population, and what you've had to endure, even though you're such a small population. I asked you about Democrats. You are a Texan at your roots. How did you feel about your guy, Ted Cruz and the Republicans?
Okay, first of all, I am not claiming I am not a Texan. I want to put that on the record. I did go to undergrad and law school at the University of Texas School of Law, so hook them there. But
okay, not at your roots.
I am not claiming anything anywhere near Ted Cruz. He is an embarrassment to humankind, much less, to Texans or, to Republicans or the senators or
to
whatever.
His daughters are like, ooh.
It's so bad. And what I don't like the most is the hypocrisy and the lack of factual basis. I guess it was Senator McConnell who said, Leader McConnell, who said, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is eminently qualified and would make a great justice and all of the things you expect to hear, and yet he's going to vote against her confirmation. And then you have to wonder, why is that, right? Is it race? And people, let's not put race in it. It's not. But she is more qualified than Amy Coney Barrett, regardless of whatever rubric you use. So what is it that makes the difference here? And the only thing that I can point to, and I don't want to, right? I want it to be, she's not as qualified, and so she should get a downvote. Understood that, but that's not the case here. So all of the Republicans, someone called her a liar. It's unfortunate that Black women in every instance, and especially here with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, have to be more qualified, more poised, right? We can balance what we saw from Judge Brown Jackson and what we saw from Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings. He was rageful, and meanwhile, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson never raised her voice.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on that point, I just want to know, I've been asking a lot of, exclusively Black people this question. What would have happened if she had slammed her fist down the table and said, enough? What would have happened? She would have lost Democratic senator votes. She would have damaged her reputation. It would have been why couldn't she just do that? It was so enraging to hear the questioning and the insinuations that they were making. It would be like, criticizing a combat veteran if you'd never been in combat, saying they weren't tough enough or whatever. It was just so enraging. Why couldn't she just slam her fist down on the table?
Because Black women don't have that luxury. We in any context, because she would be branded as an angry Black woman based on that one, hypothetical outburst. And then it would give fuel to those who say that she is not qualified to be on the bench, right? She would then be emotional when, again, we saw the difference in emotion between her and Kavanaugh. And remember when he said to the Democrats, what goes around comes around? Kavanaugh said that. He threatened. Yeah. And it's amazing.
And he's delivered.
And you know that he was coached and prepared just as every nominee is. And yet to go off script, to go off the rails in that way just shows you the amount of privilege that white men have in this country that Black women definitely don't. If, and we're talking about the confirmation hearings, but if a Black woman were to create an outburst at, in a conference room, at a board meeting, at a school board meeting, if she were to come emotional and speak about her children in that way, it would just say, we can completely blow off what they're saying because they can't control their emotions. That's just an angry Black woman, and we can dismiss whatever factual information she was providing.
I had a personal experience or feeling lesson while watching her. I watched a lot of it, and my personal character flaw is I'm very emotional, and the negative emotion is anger. I get angry way too easily and rageful even. And I was out in the garden. I remember where I was, and I'm listening to her being just absolutely disrespected, and she takes it. And she's messaging, she's sighing, she's doing very subtle things, and you didn't even need that to know that she was just taking it for the team in a way. And I just sat there and thought, if this woman can do this right now on this stage, I've got to be better. I really thought that it was an important, it should be an important lesson. But what else did you take away from the hearings that I'm not asking, maybe that people aren't asking, maybe the image of her family behind her, not only her white husband, her mixed daughters who are looking on fondly, but her parents who are very old, still alive, getting to witness their daughter. What about your personal reactions to that, or any other reaction to the hearings? I'm not asking.
Yeah, I just think she is such a wonderful choice. And so it fills me with the joy that Senator Booker talked about. She wears her hair in sister locks, as I do, which is an intentional choice. And it is very often a lifetime choice. Like, to get rid of this particular hairstyle, I'd have to cut all of my hair off. I'd have to be bald and grow it. And so that's another example of the Black excellence that she is bringing, right? It's an intentional choice that she made to wear her hair in that way. And so that's another piece of representation that is absolutely, superficial, right? We're talking about hair. Sure. But and I don't necessarily want to go there, but we know how fraught the relationship is between Black women and hair. And if you need a recent example of that, we can talk about Chris Rock and Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, right? Hair, especially for Black women, is incredibly important. So to see her there with her long flowing hair in the style that she chose was beautiful. The fact that her husband was right there by her side and providing that nonverbal support, I think, was important. The beautiful picture of her daughter looking on, and that photo that everybody has seen when her daughter's wearing, I think, like a lavender blouse, was taken by a Black woman. And that's a very important moment, because there is a lack of representation, once again, in even the press pool, right? I think there was just one Black woman, taking pictures of what is going to be the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. So just the optics of all of that, I think, is incredibly important, in addition to the poise and the grace that we absolutely expected from Ketanji Brown Jackson. And, she did not disappoint.
Let me just go off on a bit of a tangent. You mentioned that Black female photographer and underrepresentation. A lot of times there's underrepresentation for certain people in certain jobs because there's not a lot of people of that group that go into that job, typically, especially with gender, construction workers, steel union workers, all kinds of jobs that are more typically male represented.
I'm going to push back immediately. Why is that? It shouldn't be. Sure. Right? As long as you can lift a 40-pound whatever, or, and I have no experience in construction, but you're right. But we shouldn't even say that, right? Because that plays into the patriarchy, right? That all industries, as long as you are qualified, and we can talk Supreme Court workers, yep, we can talk construction workers, as long as you're qualified, it shouldn't be seen as a male-dominant job, except all jobs in this country are male-dominated jobs. And we can talk about chefs, for example, right? The most famous, the richest, the chefs that get the most play on TV are men. And yet, what do we expect at home? We typically expect women to do to do the preponderance of the cooking in the household. So you're on a tangent. I'm also on a tangent. Please go back.
No, it's fine. No, we can go to a tangent. We can keep branching off. Because with all that being said, why are they underrepresented? It's a great question to ask. But the point I was trying to make before you put the point in its place, at least, is
Blip love.
This is literally why I like to talk to you probably as much of, if not more than anybody else, because I never have to. If I step in anything that's considered shit or just wrong, you're not waiting. You're not going to be, quote, polite. No, I don't want that. I want to have the real conversation, which I always do with you. But the point is, if Black women in this case, if there aren't a lot of photographers who are Black women, and you think that there should be, and you're a non-Black person or Black man, whatever, it's a weird thing to try to advocate for that thing. It could be a little being because, I as a white man, I'm going to go find a Black woman to fit this job. It's weird for the person, I think the white person, and because they don't understand if this is okay. Am I supposed to do that? What is your advice if I want to help open doors for underrepresented underrepresented jobs, and I'm the gatekeeper. What am I supposed to do first? Find an organization, network, put it out on Facebook? Does anybody know any young, talented black women that would like to be,
Yes, yes to all of those things. It shouldn't be hard. I mean, we're talking about photojournalists, but this is exactly what President Biden just did, right? He intentionally said, I want a black woman on the Supreme Court. And so he had to find them. So just as he did, he reached out. We all have privilege, all of us. I am a black cis hetero woman. And so I have privilege over queer people, especially queer women. And I'm also able-bodied. So I have privilege over disabled people, right? And so it is my duty to use my privilege to stand in the gap for those who are more marginalized for me. And so as a white man, if you are looking for a photojournalist or a Supreme Court justice, you reach out to people and say, hey, are there organizations, because there are, and it's okay not to know. What is worse is the very worst is saying, nope, I want to hire only people who look like me forever and not even think about it, right? That's the lowest rung. What is above that, but still bad, is I want to do something better, but I don't know how to start. And so I'm not going to do anything at all, right? And Google is a thing. And as of right now, it's still free.
No, when you bring up a really good point in that anybody that's kind of a minority or much less marginalized in any way, they often organize in groups for protection and networking. And so if you actually did want to do what you're suggesting people should, you could easily Google black female steel worker org and you'll find them. You'll find people because they're a minority, they will create a group to help advocate for themselves. And so that's a really good point. Let me go back, though, one more time to the confirmation hearings. People say that because she's replacing a, quote, liberal, it doesn't change the balance of the court. You follow the politics in the Supreme Court enough to know the decisions that they're making and the rights that are being taken. So for something as important as voting rights, much less climate change or gender equity, what does this confirmation mean if she is, in fact, confirmed, which I think she probably will be?
Yeah, it means progress. It means that we are one step closer. I think back to when Justice Thurgood Marshall joined the court, the first black person ever, right? When he walked in, everything changed. And so yes, we're going to be at a 6-3, but who knows what happens with Clarence Thomas, within the next year or so. I'm hoping that he is taken from the bench because I believe that some of his decisions have been improper. We'll see. But if he leaves, then we're at 5-4, right? And that means you only have to convince one person. And I think it's important for your audience to know what this process is like. Yes, the Solicitor General and folks on the other side come and present their arguments to the Supreme Court, and then the court retires and they have their deliberative process. And there are both formal and informal communications, not just between the justices, but also between their clerks, who very often are very instrumental in writing those decisions, right? And so having those conversations that include the lived experience of a Black woman can make a significant difference. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was very open about the fact that she has family members on both sides of law enforcement. That matters when we're talking about, sentencing guidelines or things that can really make a difference in this country. And the Supreme Court is the last arbiter of the land. And so, yes, it'll still be 6-3 and it will be conservative heavy, but who knows what influence she will have over time, because this is a lifetime appointment, in maybe softening some of the views. We know that Scalia and RBG had a really good relationship. I am sure that over time he had he received different viewpoints and things that he may not have thought of initially, and that's what's important.
So I just want to take a moment to say to you and everybody who worked on and continue to work on She Will Rise. Congratulations. It's quite, your advocacy was so inspiring and so important. And I think everybody knew that. I mean, the way that you have done your branding and marketing with brilliance and fearlessness has been, I think you make it look easy. You've had so many successes, but it's really hard to do this kind of stuff the way that you've done it. And so congratulations and thank you for leading. And it's so, I'm so excited to see every tweet and every time I talk to you, I feel like better about the world. So I just wanted to take a moment to shed the light on you and everybody who worked on this, because it certainly wasn't just you. Let's pivot to the other issue, of course, that made you famous, which is the Academy Awards. And before we get to the slap heard around the world, I want to get to some of the, let me just ask you, because I just saw this in your timeline. And so let's just do this real quick, only because I see you tweeting about it. What do you want to ask me about my struggle as a bald man, as a bald white man? Go ahead. I'm here for your...
I don't want to ask you anything, Pete. Is there anything that you would like to share?
Yes. Okay. I lost my hair early and I went through puberty late. That was a rough window. And I lost my hair in my early 20s and it wasn't fun. Mm-hmm. I did fine and I'm doing fine. And now, just to be clear, it's awesome. So that's all I have to say.
Well, how long do you think it took for you to be comfortable with being bald?
A week.
Really?
Yeah, because I handled it the way I handle everything. Well, first of all, I was already with my wife, so I wasn't as concerned about will I be able to meet a woman. Maybe that's for some guys, and I have empathy for guys losing their hair, whatever. But the other thing is, I just I took it like anything else that I thought was going to get me criticized or made fun of, and I used comedy. I immediately found the jokes, and they're my best jokes probably to this day in my comedy act. But the reason I bring it up is because someone made a point to you on Twitter or made an argument. What about bald men or something like that? That's why I bring it up. I didn't really, it's not worth spending much time in it. But what do you want? I mean, what about that kind of comparison? Because I'm talking now, of course, about Jada Pinkett Smith and alopecia and black women in general.
I understand the comment. I don't think it's a fair comparison, right? So Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia, which is an autoimmune condition. And that means that she has lost her hair and there's nothing that she can do about it, or very little that people with alopecia can do about it. And so there is an incredibly fraught and layered and deep relationship that Black women specifically have with their hair. And that goes all the way back to the times of enslavement. When African people, enslaved people, were brought to this country in chains, very often their hair would tell a story. You could tell from what tribe a person was based on their hairstyle, especially with women. And so the enslavers knew that and very often shaved the heads of African women when they arrived on these shores so that one couldn't tell who they were or where they were from, right? And so here we are, obviously hundreds of years later, and Black women, there's a reason why the Crown Act just passed, because women and men and non-binary people have experienced discrimination at the workplace because of the way that they style the hair that grows out of their head. We know that Rastafarians, for example, wear very thick and long dreadlocks because that's part of their culture. And so when we switch to talking about alopecia and the fact that someone's hair that they may have spent literally a lifetime trying to grow to the length and the width and the thickness that they want, and now it's falling out, it's painful physically and emotionally. And so to make jokes about that, for example, I don't think that any comedian would have made a joke about a woman who had lost her hair based on chemotherapy, right? And because she had cancer. And this is not unlike that, in that it is a health condition that they cannot control that is causing them to lose their hair. Also, I want to say, and it depends on how far we want to get into this. Many years ago, Chris Rock did a documentary called Good Hair, in which he specifically investigated this particular issue, the relationship that Black women have with their hair. And he sat with women who had alopecia. So he knew, it's not clear to me whether Chris Rock knew that Jada Pinkett Smith has this condition. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But either way, he knew that alopecia is an issue and that this is a very sensitive subject. I also note that, some people made fun of or made jokes about Sanam Lathan and Tiffany Haddish when they intentionally and voluntarily shaved their head. This is a different situation.
No part of me believes that Chris Rock knew that. And some part of me believes that was an unscripted moment. He just saw her there. I believe Chris Rock is, because his record is his record, and I'm very familiar with his stand-up, and I know him a little bit, and how he treats people. He almost never punches down. And the reason he always goes after Jada and Will, and the past has, is because they are one of the most powerful, wealthy, famous couples in all of Hollywood, and that's, for him at least, punching up. And I mean, we'll find out if he did know, but I don't think he would have ever made that joke, nor do I think it was scripted. So, for whatever it's worth.
I think that the Hollywood Reporter has said that it was an extemporaneous.
Yeah.
That he was riffing.
It was by the way, every comedian out there is kind of making fun of him too. Like, he wouldn't have scripted G.I. Jane. He would have done something different with bald head. Like, he would have done it was such an old reference anyway. And that's, I think, what he was trying to say when he responded with, it's a G.I. Jane. Like, it was a stupid joke. It wasn't even a good joke. And you're getting, I think I'm making nothing but assumptions. So before we get to that, I want to, let's say, before that, you were, and so many other people were excited about many of the nominees and what do you want to say about some of the winners and nominees when it comes to diversity? Because that's the issue, obviously, that made you famous, diversity in these award shows and in the entertainment industry.
I implore media outlets, not unlike you, to refocus the spotlight where it belongs, which is not on this slap, but in the history that was made Sunday night, because it's incredibly important, and those people deserve their moment. So we can talk about the fact that this is the first time that the Best Picture Oscar has gone to films directed by women in back-to-back years. This year it was Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog. Last year it was Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. Coda broke a lot of records. It's the first film distributed by a streaming service to win Best Picture. It's the first Sundance premiere to ever take the top Oscar, and the first film since 1932's Grand Hotel to prevail without nominations for directing and editing. Coda is also, and I think most special, because Troy Kutzer is the first deaf man to win an acting Oscar. He won for Best Supporting Actor. And let's remember that his co-star, Marilee Matlin, won for Children of a Lesser God? Decades ago. And so it's been years. So kudos to the disability community. We're talking about Will Smith and the slap heard around the world, but he also became the fifth Black actor to win an Oscar for Best Actor, following Forrest Whitaker, Jamie Foxx, Denzel Washington, and Sidney Poitier. I think that despite the fact that the Latinx community makes up nearly 20% of the population and 25% of the box office, and they are the largest growing demographic, only 2 Latinas have ever won an Oscar for acting in any of the acting categories. And they were for the same role 60 years apart. Ariana DeBose and Rita Moreno, who wonderfully was also there and was in West Side Story. Ariana, I think, I may be wrong, but I think is also the first openly queer woman to win an acting Oscar. So all of those things are amazing. They all speak to the hashtag I created in 2015, Oscar So White, which is not just about race, but all marginalized communities.
Yes, I think that's exactly how it should be framed and positioned in terms of it's just so hard to think about all the more important achievements sometimes when we're so tempted to talk about the unplanned, the accident, the thing that attracts everybody, the conflict. And
I wasn't even watching, and then my phone blew
I saw
up.
that was wait a second. I saw your So let me just ask you about two tweets. First of all, that one you tweeted. My phone just blew up. What happened or something? And I was like I actually went to your Twitter feed, I think maybe first, and it seemed like you weren't watching the Academy Awards. Why? What were you doing?
I was binging another show, which I won't mention because they're not paying me to support them. But yeah, I was just, I was on my couch just relaxing. I haven't watched the awards unless I have been commissioned to watch. I don't watch, and neither does anybody else. I mean, based on the ratings for the last several years, definitely since Oscar So White, there has been a downtick. I think, this year they went up, and I think there's several reasons for that. One, Will Packer, who is an amazing Black producer, produced the Oscars for the first time. And so Black people for sure wanted to show their support. But he had been talking for months about how he was going to make this the best, the biggest, the differentest, which is not a word, the Oscars telecast in a really long time, right? So there were high expectations. Number two, Beyonce was there, period. So people show up just to see Beyonce, and I absolutely get that. And number three, I think that the ratings skyrocketed once Will slapped Chris because millions of people like me jumped onto, that channel and, prayed that our little DVR set-top box would allow us to rewind 5 minutes so that we could see what actually happened. But, the Oscars, there are so many things wrong with the Academy. And I can get my updates via Twitter, my social media platform of choice. So there's no, and it's too long, and I never find the host funny. And they take out things that I think should be put in, with respect to the categories that you actually get to see on TV. And so I've given up.
By the way, one of the reasons I've always had this theory as a comedian that the hosts are rarely funny in such shows is that rich, wealthy, famous people don't like to be laughed at. And the kind of material that they're coming up with that you kind of to have integrity as a comedian is to make fun of them. It just doesn't work. It never has. It never will. The first two jokes you get, the third joke, they're like, I earned this. How dare you? It's just.
That's right. And that's why, at the Golden Globes, when you really got to see, and everything has to be scripted, and it has to go through layers of, clearance and all the rest of that. And so by the time it's so sanitized and watered down that nothing is funny, number one. That's why at the Golden Globes, which has its own set of problems and wasn't even, telecast this year, everybody's drunk. The Oscars, you're sitting at least, in previous years, pre-pandemic, everybody is sitting, in a huge theater, kind of like a movie theater, right? Or, and so you're just sitting there. At the Golden Globes, there's food, there's wine, there's champagne. Everybody is soused. And so you can get away or could get away with a lot more because it's like, okay, I'm a little tipsy, so I'm not going to be as offended.
It's also uncomfortable to watch certain things. Like Amy Schumer walked up to Kirsten Dunst. She was doing a bit about, explaining how they have seat fillers at the Academy Awards, and walked over to Kirsten Dunst and said, excuse me, miss, here's one now, a seat filler. Could you get up? And she wasn't in on the joke, Kirsten Dunst. She was not in on the joke. And she felt like, I'm actually a successful person and you're making me seem like that's how I felt. Like it was embarrassing for her. I didn't like that. I thought that was, and it made me as a viewer uncomfortable is what I'm trying to say. Least important moment of the night, but still one of those reasons why I certainly don't watch. All right. In terms of what happened, I want to ask you, how is this a racial thing? I kind of got into it with a well-known progressive commentator who tweeted, a guy named David Pakman, who I like him a lot. I think he's really smart. But he tweeted, he's like, this, tell me what hot take to have because I really don't care. And let's get back to to more important things. And I was like, listen, I don't know, but this seems important, especially to black folks. And you tweeted right after it happened, black people, what is the emergency Zoom link? Because we need to discuss in mass. This can't wait for our monthly meeting. And like for the first 5 seconds after reading that tweet, I was like, I literally in my head go, they have a monthly meeting. But and I was even more insidious. I was like, how can I get invited? And then actually you did have the conversation later on. I'm sure when you have been, but why was this necessarily a racial thing? Why do black folks care so much about it? And why did I see also a lot of, and I think you might have been one of these people, white folks can sit out with their takes until we're done kind of thing. Like you can wait. Like what was that all about? What, the racial component of Will Smith hitting Chris Rock, and why are white people saying, I don't care about this?
Oh, there's so much to unpack, and I'm not going to be able to do it all. So Will and Chris have history. Back in 2016, when Chris Rock was hosting the Academy Awards, he made a joke about Jada that did not fly well, about her not being invited to the awards. And so that has been simmering under the surface. There is the overarching sentiment and reality that Black women especially are not protected in this world. Malcolm X said very famously, and I'm going to paraphrase, the most disrespected, the most unprotected person in this country is the Black woman. That was true in the 60s when he said it. It's true today. And we've talked about that, right? About Black women being patriotic and not receiving support for that. So there's that. And so I think that a lot of people were not used to seeing a Black man come to the defense of a Black woman in such a public way. And we can relate this back to Senator Booker and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, because even then people were like, oh, he's doing too much and he's being corny and, this wasn't necessary and it's inappropriate. And it's like, no, that's exactly what we want to see. Now, we can absolutely say that violence is wrong. We can say that, wrong time, wrong place, whatever. Maybe Will should have pulled Chris Rock aside at the after party and said, hey, you upset Jada, let's talk this through, whatever. But in that moment, and there's more, there is the fact that Will Smith has an autobiography out that's relatively recent. And he said in there that his father was very abusive to his mother. And so maybe, I'm no psychotherapist by any means, but maybe that was brewing, the guilt and the shame that he felt from not being able to protect his mother. Here's his opportunity, right? There's the fact that very publicly, Will and Jada have an open relationship in which they both date outside the marriage. But typically we don't know who those people are. And then it became very public that for a time, Jada dated August Alsina. And I don't think it was the fact that they dated because, again, they have an open marriage. I think it was all of the questioning of Will's masculinity, sure, because his wife was dating someone else, even though he was also dating someone else, right? And so that toxic masculinity became a thing. All of those things, and the fact that it was a Black man and another Black man. And so, I saw, if Will never would have done this to Jimmy Fallon or would a Black comedian have said that about a white woman? It's all over the place. What I will say is that all the time, not just here, but if you are not part of the community that is most directly impacted, you need to sit down, shut up, and listen. And that goes for Black folks, that goes for straight folks, that goes for everybody, right? Because you don't have the cultural context. Should you care? Yes. So that guy, David, he should care because, this is a worldwide event for the next 24 to 36 hours, right? But should he weigh in? No, because he doesn't have the cultural competency to do so.
All right, let me just go delete a few tweets of mine.
I know that you know better. I know that is not even you, but I appreciate it.
I think the one hot take or the one quick reaction I had was, no part of me thinks that Chris Rock knew that Jada had alopecia. That's all I said. But
the question is, you've said that a couple of times. So the pushback is, does it matter whether he knew?
Yes.
Because does it? Because we know about the documentary, when he knows about the pain that, and he was married to a Black woman who, according to history, he did not treat well. So
Chris Rock is I mean, in his stand-up special, I thought he did such a great job after his divorce in his own hour special, taking credit and taking blame for his divorce. I thought it was really
right. Yeah, sure.
But,
right. Because maybe he's been through therapy or he's seen the light or somebody's pulled him aside. But it's the point that he has to take credit for bad behavior. I
think it does matter only because immutable characteristics. If you choose to cut your hair a certain way, I can make fun of you. If you didn't choose that, then I can't make fun of you.
But why?
Because I'm a comedian, this is a comedy show, and you're one of the most famous, wealthy people in the world, and those are always going to be the people that get made fun of, and if they show up, and in her case, even if they don't.
I guess so. I would say it wasn't a comedy show, right? It was a show, and everybody knew this was Will Smith's night, among others. This was also going to be Questlove's night. It was Will's. It was Will's statue to lose. And so there was an immense amount of anxiety and pressure or whatever. And she was there to support her husband, right? And so why on their special night would you want to take them down a peg?
That is a great point. I haven't heard made. I like that point.
There you go. This is why you have me on.
Huh?
This is why you have me on, because I make great points every now and again.
I mean, the whole time, I think. But I'm trying to find this tweet that you shared. It's really interesting about someone asking a question. Women, tell me when or if a man.
If you ever felt protected by a Black man. And
was it by a Black man?
Yeah. And the sad part about that tweet is that there were many people who said no, in my entire life, or, outside of my father, and sometimes maybe not even then. In my entire life, I have never felt protected by a man.
Well, the question was, nothing is more sexist than a woman needing protection. A lot of smart people I respect kind of made that point. What do you think?
No. I just don't agree with that. I think about street harassment, right? I think about women minding their business, walking down the street, and a construction worker or a guy with a cup of coffee or whatever starts catcalling. And I think about the fact that women die. Women die if they give their phone numbers to men, and women die if they don't give their phone numbers to men. So if I'm walking down the street and someone is catcalling me, I absolutely want someone to say, hey, are you okay? Hey, she's with me. Yeah, and to be honest, I don't care how that person identifies, but I do know that men will take a step back faster if it is another man that is checking them.
I will tout my own bona fides in this category, which is I discovered a move years ago while living in New York City. I don't know, I guess maybe I was raised right. I don't remember any lessons, but it always made me feel dirty and weird and uncomfortable when I'd see women getting, catcalled, especially. And so I developed a move which I love. It's dangerous. I don't highly recommend it. But when I would see a man, and this happened several times, catcalling a woman, I would go up to him and catcall him.
Oh.
And it is a really fun, because the guy, I'll never forget, this guy was like, hey, mommy, bring that, sweet ass over here. And he was leering out of his truck, and I walked up to him and I go, why don't you bring that sweet ass down here? Dude just left. Dude just drove away.
Yes. 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 But I think whatever is necessary. We have all seen through body language, a woman who feels uncomfortable, sitting at the bar. And so I have heard that there have been men who will just come up, hey, honey, sorry, I'm late. Everything good? Let's go to our table. Just giving her that moment to get away, to get a breath, and then whatever. And yes, I'm sure that there are women who are like, no, I can take care of myself, whatever. And good for them. I am just not one of those women. If you see that I am in distress, freaking help me.
I also did that with a young woman on a ferry when I was 25. I was talking to her. I was flirting with her, and a guy came over. He was drunk, and she looked at me like, "Are you going to say something?" And so I just simply said, "Hey, man, I think you've had too much to drink," and he punched me right in the face.
Okay. Oh, and I appreciate you taking that punch.
And April, it was the greatest punch in the world. Because first of all, dude was like 4'2". He was tiny. And there was no escalation. Usually with guys, there's this kind of, whoa, hit you in a chest bump. He hit me and my best friend who was traveling with me with the same punch. Boom, boom. Guy was behind me. Hit us both.
Okay. And you remember this moment, which...
Yes, well, there was an award show after. We gave him an award. It was quite a move. I'm sorry for bragging about how great a guy I am. I just think those are funny stories. And but the more important point is I highly recommend. I was on that tweet reading the comments for a long time. I highly recommend going to April's Twitter feed and reading the reactions. That it was very enlightening. At Reign of April. It's of course all of April stuff in the show links. All right. Well, I will let you go, but I just love talking to you. I'm so glad that you're in my life. How's California? The big move. We talked about that. Any regrets going from one coast to another? How do you like? How's it been? How long's it been?
2 days.
You've only been there for 2 days?
Well, it's a really long story. I've been bi-coastal for a while. I'm renovating my house on the East Coast to prepare it for sale. And so, there was a week or 10 days or something when I was holed up in that bedroom as all of the construction workers were working on the house. And then I did some traveling. And so here permanently in Los Angeles, officially 2 days. And I leave like in 2 days and I'm going to be gone for a while. But no, to answer your question, absolutely no regrets. It was either going to be LA or New York. I am over winters. It is beautiful. I don't even have a ring light on right now. This is the sun coming into my home. I love everything about it. I'm very thankful and privileged that I already have a community here of friends, that I can go out with. I'm having my car shipped. She should be here tomorrow or even maybe today. So I'm.
Did you genderize your car?
Yes. Her name is Simone after Biles because I got her last August at the end of the Olympics. Yeah. You
named your car Simone Biles as a tribute to Simone. Do you think if she found out that she would feel it was a tribute? Does it depend on the make and model?
Amazing. Yes. It is a hybrid, so it is gentler on the planet. It is a beautiful, sleek car. It is incredibly functional. So I think, yes, so maybe I need to reach out to Simone. No, her name is Simone, not Biles, but my car's name is Simone. And then my daughter, who was being very ethnic one day, decided because it's a Toyota, she decided her middle name is Toyisha, which I don't use, but Simone Toyisha Rain is
I think giving a car a second or middle name is too far myself.
Okay, it's fair.
It's a lot.
That's fair.
It's a lot to refer. Unless you have like seven.
We go by Simone, but yeah, she's wonderful. And everything, I other than like rent prices, I highly recommend.
Yeah. Do you think, real quick, so the cost of living, and everybody's talking about how California, everything, prices are going up on a lot of different things. But have you noticed the standard of living being easier or cost of living being higher on the West in California, or what were you saying?
The cost of living is definitely higher, so I'm having to think about taxes, right? Going from the East Coast to West Coast, my taxes are going to increase significantly. Right. I don't have to think as much about gas prices, but the gas prices, because I have a hybrid and so I can plug my girl in at the end of the day. But I know that the gas prices here are like $3 more a gallon. $3 more a gallon, which is serious. And then the rent prices and the food prices and going out to restaurants and the Lyft prices. Yes, it is all more expensive here. Totally worth it. No regrets.
Thank you so much for talking to me, April. I love talking to you, following you, and following you, being inspired by you.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, there she goes. Oh, I love her. April Rain, everybody. Please go over and thank her for joining us here at Reign of April. I should have her come by to hang out at some point. It should be so much fun there. And I hope to see you there tonight, folks. Tonight's Hangout, 8 Eastern. Look for the link. It should be in your inbox. If you're not getting the daily email and you're a subscriber, reach out to me. I know some of you have had issue with that at times. Standupwithpete@gmail.com. That is me. Standupwithpete@gmail.com. And if you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? Get on over to standupwithpete.com and sign up now. Little as $5 a month to get all the benefits, and you can pay certainly a whole lot more than that. And many of you are very generous and listen to the show and are a big part of the community and pay a lot more. And I so appreciate all of you, each and every one of you. And I'm looking forward to meeting more of you and seeing you tonight. All right. Thank you, S.E. Cupp. Thank you, April Rain. Thank you, Pete Coe, as always. John Carroll for the music. DJ Monzak made my website and my logo, and so many other listeners contributing in so many ways. That's all I've got time for today. I will talk to you tomorrow with Ophira Eisenberg and Christian Finnegan and a couple of other people. I just don't know which one I'm going to play, but you'll like it, I hope. I love you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow or tonight. Bye-bye.
Off of your butt, down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down, boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.